Hi, welcome to the Run Testers. I'm Nick, and with me is Kieran. And today we've got something a little bit different. We're going to really drill down into one particular event and talk about the kind of gear and tips around the gear you can use for that. The event is the Marathon Des Sables. How do you say it? Sables.
Well, it depends if you're going to do a French accent, Nick.
I am.
The Marathon Des Sables.
The Marathon Des Sables, and we can also talk a little bit about the Half Marathon Des Sables, because Kieran has done both. He's done very well at both. He was the 91st across the line at the Marathon Des Sables in 2015.
2015, yeah.
And he was the best Brit at the Half Marathon Des Sables, of which there was one Brit, two Brits. No, how many Brits were there?
There's loads and loads of really good Brits. Might beat them all. It wasn't that competitive, Nick. But I have to take these small things at my kind of age. That was in Fuerteventura, by the way.
Fuerteventura, sorry, yeah. I will say the Marathon Des Sables is obviously a very different event to everything else. So I think even if you've done the Half Marathon Des Sables, you're not really going to know what you're in for, which is why you've come here with some tips as someone who's done it.
Yeah, and I think one of the huge things about the MDS, we'll call it the MDS from now on, is the kit. It's logistics. You know, it's one of the big things before you're about to go out into the desert. The kit really matters. How it works, how it performs. Can you rely on your bag? Do you get blisters from your shoes? Are you going to be able to take enough fuel? How are you going to fit it all in the bag? All of these things really weigh on your mind when you're prepping for it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to cover it off and share some of the things that I learned when I was out there and whilst I was getting all of my kit ready, so that you guys don't have to make any of those mistakes that other people make.
Yeah.
And hopefully it will help you fine tune what you're doing. As with anything, the caveat here is that test everything, because what worked for me might not work for you, but there are some things that I found that worked really, really well.
We should probably quickly say, we're going to assume a fair amount of knowledge of what the race is, but a very quick description of the Marathon Des Sables would be great, Kieran.
Yeah, so for the full Marathon Des Sables, you're doing about 250 kilometres over 6 days, and that's roughly sort of broken down into, you've got 5 running days where you're doing sort of 30 to 40 Ks many days. You've got one day that's really long, and then on the final day you're going to do a marathon. So you've got one really long hefty day in there. You're camping overnight in these open-sided tents. You have to carry all your kit with you, including everything that you're going to eat for the week, on your back. Nice. So cooking equipment, sleeping bag, any mats you're going to take, all the spare clothes you're going to take, socks, everything you need goes in this backpack. Road book, there's another kind of flare, all kinds of things. So you're thinking very much about weight as well and how much you have to carry.
Yeah, well, it sounds absolutely dreadful, but I'm sure lots of people will like it. It's not for me, but you've done it, and let's dive into your tips. What's your first kind of tip for people who are going to maybe doing this?
Yeah, so one of the big things people will talk about is shoes, right?
Yeah.
So what shoes shall I wear? Now, one of the things, when you think about the Marathon Des Sables, everyone conjures up these pictures of running across these beautiful kind of dunes, long stretches in this kind of deep sand. You do have that, but the really big thing here that gets you are these kind of massive, they're like dried up riverbeds, used to be riverbeds a long time ago, and they're full of fist-sized stones, sort of pebbles, and basically carpets of them. And these are the stretches, and some kind of slightly sort of technical kind of downhills that are very rocky, that are the bits that will do you blisters. Okay. So with shoes, my recommendation here is that you're not looking for something that's too heavy, because you will have to run through the sand, but you do want something that's going to be able to be a bit comfortable on these fist-sized pebbles as well. Okay. So I think really interestingly, actually, I ran the MBDS in an Innovate Race Ultra 270. It's a really lightweight shoe, plenty of room in the toe box, just enough protection from the outer toe if you kicked some of these stones. But it was a zero drop shoe as well. But a shoe that's just come out, I think, that could be very interesting for the MDS is the Innovate Trailfly G300 Max, because I think it's going to have a little bit more protection in the cushioning without adding too much weight. And I think it will swallow those stones but not be too bad in the sand to do it. The other thing to think about shoes, people say, should I go half a size up? The answer here, I think definitely you need a good lockdown fit, but you are going to want to be able to get these shoes on and off very easily, right, without having to wriggle kind of very sore tender toes into a tight toe box. Yeah. I tried out a lot of kind of Salomon shoes for me that came up narrow, that were quite narrow in the toe box before I went out and did it. And I now know, having done it, that those would have been a mistake for me. Have plenty of wiggle room. If you end up in Doc Trotter's, a tent where if you get blisters and you have to have your feet seen to, where they'll basically slice open your blisters and pump iodine into, and then sort of start wrapping them with various types of tape and plasters, you're going to have room to accommodate those in your shoes as well. So when it comes to shoes, I think you're looking for this kind of balance of enough, just the right amount of weight on your feet, not to be heavy in the sand, not too heavy lugs, because actually it's very dry. You're not going to slip. Okay. You're on kind of loose scree and stuff, but you don't need that kind of wet stone grip that you'd find elsewhere. and you want something that's going to be sort of cushioned enough to protect you on sort of quite a lot of hard, firm ground. So arguably, you know, it might be a bit risky, but there's some stretches out there, long stretches, that you'd probably even be able to get away with running in a road shoe.
Oh.
It's a big shout, but test them out, and those are my tips for the shoes.
Brilliant. So shoes obviously is a massive part of it. What's your next kind of tip?
My next tip is, people will talk about Vaseline. Don't take Vaseline. Chafing is a thing to consider out there, definitely, over all these days. Chafing of the bag rubbing, chafing of, you know, shorts rubbing, definitely down in the feet. Vaseline is your enemy when you hit the sand, because Vaseline plus sand equals laceration, right? and the sand will get everywhere, and you do not want lacerating sand Vaseline
Jesus.
everywhere, right? So
just do a park run. This is ridiculous.
So leave your Vaseline at home.
Do you have anything for chafe? You just have to accept it. Good kit, I guess, is the way.
So my next tip, and this was a real find for me when I tested, is something I took. There's things like Body Glide, but I took something called Two-Tom Sport Shield.
Okay.
That was for my chafing. So it's a little roll-on stick. It's nice and compact. It's smaller than the deodorant size sort of Body Glides. Comes in a little roll-on, and it would fit in a lot of the pockets in your pack. It sort of sits nicely when you're looking for this confined space. You're looking for these things that might slide into a shoe or into a cook pot or whatever. So it's really nice in terms of the size. Roll here, roll down there, and then I left my feet. I didn't put that on, and that was it. So Two-Tom Sport Shield, and it worked a treat. I had enough in one of those sticks to last me all week, no problem at all, and I was very, very liberal with it.
Yeah.
And I had no problems with chafing at all whatsoever.
Are you applying that like kind of are you applying that several times a day, or?
Once a day I had to.
Okay.
Just put it on in the morning, do a lot of it, pay special attention to how much of it and where. Don't be shy about getting it into all the crevices, honestly. And also, maybe, you know, if you're worried about pack rubbing, some people will put a bit of tape on their shoulders, but I just rub a bit of this, and it means that you can avoid some of that.
Nice. Shoes and chafing, probably the two big ones are covered. What was next on you?
The other one, and it's another product from Two-Toms, and it's called Blister Shield.
Okay.
So blistering on the feet. So if I'm not taking my Vaseline to Vaz my feet, what am I going to do? Some people will tape their toes.
Okay.
So before I went out there, I spoke to a foot specialist. They work with a lot of kind of Premier League football players who have to deal with blisters having their feet in boots all the time. And he's like, first thing I say to people is, don't tape your toes.
Okay.
Reason being, his argument is that the taping actually just introduces an extra potential friction point. If you get the tape kinked, if you don't tape it right, you're basically introducing something that can cause more of a problem than it removes. What I did instead was, I had my shoes nicely fitted, and I took a powder called Two-Tom's Blister Shield. It's basically like a talc that it allows water out, so it will let the sweat go out, but it stops sweat being reabsorbed into the foot. So it kept my feet nice and dry, and the powder acts as a nice kind of, I guess not a lubricant, I don't really know, but it made your kind of feet slide a little bit together without getting kind of sticky and wet. So it kind of stopped sweat becoming a rubbing issue. Okay. I powdered my feet all over very carefully. I powdered inside my socks, and I powdered a little bit in my shoes. Nice. Every morning I was diligent about this, very diligent about when I pulled on my socks, ensuring that there was no kinks in my socks. When my feet went into the shoes, that there was no gathering in any of my socks. The minute I felt something slightly wrong, I took it out and I went again. If that happens during the race, stop and fix it early. Yeah. But I can't stress enough, in the morning, spend time on that, and you'll be happy, because the last thing you want is blisters. I got through the whole MDS with 2 tiny blisters. I took my own iodine and a syringe. You have to get Friar's Balsam actually as the product. Okay. And I dealt with my own blisters. I didn't go to Doc Trotter. I only got 2 tiny blisters though. I was the only person in my tent that had that. Okay. Was it the shoes? Was it the powder? Was it my socks that I chose? I did other things, like I avoided taking silly risks, like sprinting across those stones of rocks that I mentioned. Yeah. When I didn't need to. Yeah. You know, I took time and picked my route, because you're saving 3 minutes. The minute those blisters come, you'll lose those minutes easily. Yeah. So this kind of protection. So it might be a mixture of those things together, but protection, self-preservation with those things, I think, is a key tip. Definitely. And you mentioned socks there. Let's talk socks. Let's give us your sock game for the MDS. So my sock game for the MDS was the X-Bionic Speed Metal. Okay. X-Bionic do a lot of people use X-Bionic kit out there. They do kind of tops that reflect the heat, and very good for heat control. But the Speed Metal socks were excellent for me. I took 3 pairs. Okay, that was my tip. I only took 3. That was enough. And I made a decision the next day whether I wanted to go for the clean socks. I saved one right to the end for the last day as a little treat. And I found it was all right. Some people washed their socks and dried them, but I got away with 3. You don't want to be carrying too many pairs of socks.
Okay.
But yeah, Bionic speed metal socks didn't give me any blistering.
Nice one. All right. So we're a lot on feet there. Any more feet tips? Or are we moving on?
Now the other thing, I guess sand. Sand is the big issue, and people are going to consider where the sand gets and how you avoid it getting into your shoes. It's the massive thing that you worry about, because if that gets in and you're starting to get lacerated feet, it's a problem. There will be big long stretches in the sand. I actually didn't find the sand to be a problem. I took compression calf sleeves, not because I wanted the compression, that was like a little bonus, but I basically had them so that when I put these on, I'd pull my socks up and I had my compression calf sleeves over the top of my sock, and then I had my gaiters would come up over the calf sleeves. So what you've got there is basically a seal. So you've got your gaiters over the shoes, and there's no gaps there to get sand as much down the inside of your socks. So the compression sleeves act as a bit of a seal, kept the sand out. And again, being really diligent about making sure those are fitted right, and you've got that sort of tight compression was brilliant for me. So it stopped any sands. I didn't have any problem with the sand going in.
That's interesting. You mentioned gaiters there. It's a product that people aren't really familiar with, I think, until you're in very deep mud or in sand. So yeah, it kind of attaches to the shoe, does it? Yeah,
so gaiters are basically a cover that will come up. They go over the shoe, they attach around the shoe. There's various different ways of attaching them. You can hook them on, or you can get Velcro stitched around, and then they've got Velcro that attaches around, so they'll clip on. Then they come up over and they're elasticated.
Yeah.
And there's sort of the ones that I had zipped. I used Raid Lights ones, and they worked great for me. The one tip here with the gaiters: don't rely on the hooks. Some shoes come with built-in gaiter hooks. You can send them away, in the UK anyway, to get those Velcro attachers sewn on. They get glued and they get sewn on. That means they won't come away.
Yeah.
If you only glue them, they can come away.
Okay.
And then you basically attach the Velcro gaiters every morning. Pay attention to how those are attached again. Make sure they're in place. Try not to take them on and off too much, because the Velcro can wear.
All right, you're out there for 5 days. What are you eating and how are you eating it?
So yeah, big consideration. How are you going to get all those calories? You have to take, I think it's like 2,000 calories per day for 7 days. You have to carry them all. You have to show the MDS bureaucrats that you've got them all and a list of calories. So your big thing is bang for buck calories and saving weight. So you don't want to be, you've got to take a mixture of foods that you're going to be able to eat on the run, and then you don't necessarily just want to be eating peanuts and stuff when you get back to camp. You kind of want to have a hot meal if you can.
Yeah.
So that means stove time. Stoves and cook pots are big. Here's a trick that it's strictly not necessarily in the spirit of it, and you are going to be taking a risk. I took my own little stove, tiny little thing. Everyone in my tent also had a stove.
Yeah.
You have to take fuel bricks in order to power the stove. You can't gather wood and burn fires. Generally, there's not enough there. Buy your stove bricks. Borrow someone else's stove. In the tent, what will happen if you're, and again, this might depend. If you're going with friends and you're all going to be in one tent, you can organise this before you go.
Yeah.
By the time you get to day 4 in the tent, you've made friends with everyone. They're borrowing your paracetamol. They're desperately after your Friars Balsam and your blister plasters and everything that they didn't bring enough of. And most people will lend you their stove.
Okay.
If you're not going to be back too early, and you can wait to eat.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you borrow the stove with a guy who's going to be out there for 15 days, and you're waiting, you're hungry, that's going to be a problem. But more often than not, there was someone back, and you could just borrow their stove and save a bit of weight.
All right. So cadge off other people, basically.
So yeah, and then there's some other things that you can, you want to think very carefully about the weight that you're carrying, and do I really need all of this stuff, and will someone else have some of these things?
Well, part of the point of the race is, I guess, it fosters a massive community each night, and there's advantages to that you'd be stupid not to take advantage of, I guess.
Yeah, and the other thing is that if you've got these tiny little minimal titanium stoves and stuff, once they're set up and the fire's burning, it makes sense just to keep adding the fuel to it and burning and boiling the water, because in the wind with the open-sided tents and the wind can rush through, it can be a real pain to get the fires started and get those little fuel blocks burning. So boiling water whilst you're all at it is good, and it's a nice thing to do. Boil some water for your mates.
Yeah,
it's a really nice part of the camaraderie.
Nice. So you mentioned weight a few times now, and I guess just as important is the actual physical space, fitting stuff into a bag. How do you do that?
So this is another trick. A lot of the packaging around the foods, they come in big packets with lots of air in them, lots of space. You start to try and cram all this stuff into your backpack and you realise that there's not enough room. So one of the things you can do here is to buy or borrow a vacuum sealing machine. It's what fancy chefs use to kind of sous vide their salmon steaks, you know, water bath cooking. But basically, again, if you're going in a group, get one of these and share it around amongst you to save the money. But you just decant and suck out all the air around all of your stuff. Saves weight, means things kind of pack down more compact in your backpack. It makes it nice and easy to write the calorie counts on the packets. Okay. The other really interesting thing is that I took lots of little packets I took like a handful of crisps or a handful of nuts, and I had my day packs all packed together. And it was a bit like having an aeroplane meal, you know. You've got on a long haul flight, they give you those little things to kill time. Yeah. When you get back into camp, you've got quite a lot of time to kill, and it's quite nice. You get all these little snacks, and there's something about opening them and having that enjoyment of little packets and stuff. It's just it's a psychological trick that really works. So vacuum seal your stuff, decant it as much as possible.
What other tips have you got, Kieran, for the Marathon Des Sables?
So the other thing, we're back on weight here again, sleeping bag and sleeping mats. Okay. It's a big one because that's a big part of what's going into your backpack. And a question that I always get asked about here is, how light can I go? Yeah. So how thin can my sleeping bag be? Do I need a sleeping mat? The answer is basically as thin as you dare and as light as you dare. And how comfortable do you want to be? I took a really, really light sleeping bag, which was a Yeti Fever Zero. I think it weighed something like about 60 or 70 grams. Okay. It's essentially like sleeping in a very light crisp packet, very thin down feathers. It was a risk, it was a gamble. It wasn't too cold on the nights that I was there. You're in tents that are open-sided, so the wind can come flying through. Jesus. So you're taking a gamble. I got away with it. I took a half Thermarest inflatable mat as well. Some people will take the full length. Yeah. I saved 100 grams from it, and it means that it sort of supports your head and your torso. Okay. So your bottom bit is just off the mat. Again, I got away with it, I was comfortable enough, but if you need comfort for sleep, you know, it's up to you to make a decision here about trading off when you wake up, how good do you want your back to feel to go and run? Are you going to run better having that comfortable night's sleep with the extra weight than weight saving? The people who are out there to race and go really light will strip all this back and take the risk. If you're just going to complete and you want a bit of comfort, take a bit of extra weight. One of the guys in my tent, on the night before we went out there, decided, just before kit check, that he was going to jettison his sleeping bag and was not going to take one because he'd be all right. And he then spent the rest of the week, within the tents you sleep on these big rugs, they're massive rugs, and he'd roll himself over one kink of the tent, of the rug, for the whole week, like he was Aladdin or something, basically stealing a bit of room from us as well, so we were all sardined up. And he said afterwards that he kind of wished he'd never done it, he'd taken his sleeping bag, so that's a bit of a risk for you.
Fair enough.
So the other tip that I wanted to say here is leave your phone at home. Okay. Take a phone that doesn't have any apps on it, doesn't have any Wi-Fi connection, doesn't have anything, but does have a camera, all right? You want a camera to take some footage and videos and films and take beautiful photos. If you want to, this is a once in a lifetime, get some photos of doing it. You will regret not doing that, so take your phone. But you don't want to come back into camp and be connected to the outside world. The whole point of this is you're going into the desert to be on your own, to be isolated, to be away from all of this. Detach yourself for 7 days. Do it, please. I mean, you get emails come through from people, they get printed out, they bring them round to the tent every night, and that moment when you get those emails, if you've been detached from the world and not had contact with your loved ones, it's magic. It's an absolute magic moment. Before you go to sleep, you read the emails, have a little, you know, people blubbing under their sleeping bags because it's really emotional. It's such a big thing that comes into the tent. If you've got your phone and you're messaging family, you're ruining that. Yeah. And you're missing part of the point, which is to go into the desert and forget the world exists. Yeah.
And then last one, it's a question I have, so I'm just going to ask it. Always about gear is, what backpack did you use for the Marathon?
I actually used the WAA, the WAA Ultra pack that's designed for the MDS. Okay. It comes with lots of compartments you can take on and off the belts. The bottle holders were good. It basically lasted the full week without any problems with me. I found the shoulder straps nice and wide, comfortable on the shoulders, no rubbing. I know that some other people took other backpacks that fell apart after sort of day 3. That didn't happen with this. What I will say is get your pack early, customise it. I took mine to a tailor. I worked out there was a lot of straps that were long, or I wanted to have I got them to stitch over the pull loops, so that I had thumb loops to pull tighter and tighter. I got them to cut off excess strapping.
Right.
And I worked out over a period of 2 months the bits that I needed, the bits that I didn't need, bits that might needed reinforcing, and I took it to a tailor, and it cost me about 20 quid to get it customised.
That's a good idea.
And it was brilliant, and it worked a treat, and it meant I saved, I think I cut off all the straps, I think I saved about 150 grams. Sounds silly, but if you do that in a lot of places, you can then put that in a treat of another bit of food, or it means that sleeping bag that you're worried about taking doesn't matter anymore.
Also, they won't be flapping around.
They're not flapping around, that's really annoying. The other thing I'll say is take some conduction tape, so either some gaffer tape or what do you call it, electrical duct tape. Tape it, whack it round your drinks bottles, and if you're going to take poles, I didn't, wrap it round your poles. Okay. It's there in case you need it. If your shoe comes apart, take it off the pole, you can take the shoes. It doesn't add weight, it's really unnecessary, but you've got this extra backup of something that might fix a broken strap should you need it.
Nice one. So that's kind of Kieran's real top tips, highlighted tips that really come to mind after running the MDS. Obviously this is a huge event, people might have a million other questions. Please get in touch on the comments and Kieran will do his best to answer them. If he's not around, I'll answer them with no knowledge, I'll just make something up. And we'll do our best to help you through the race if you are planning either to do the half MDS or the full MDS. Other than that, let us know what you think of this video. We might do some more around these kind of big events if we can. If they're popular, like, subscribe, ring the little bell so you get notified when we do more videos. And yeah, that's really it from us, so we'll say goodbye.